This is part 3 and the last part of lecture 8, and we're looking at chapter 24, microbial disease of the urinary and reproductive system. Okay, please be familiar with the structures of the urinary and reproductive system for both females and males. And this is just a partial review from your anatomy class. These are the major structures here of the urinary reproductive system. And as far as microorganisms, how do they enter the reproductive system? In the case of females, it will be through the vagina. And in the case of males, it will be through the urethra. Okay, and the skin of the penis, as you can see here. Okay, so we, just like in other organ systems, we do have normal microbiota. In the case of the urinary, we have the lactobacillus and also some staphylococcus strains. The other urinary organs are sterile. That means there's no presence. We have also various organisms in the case of the vagina that actually are present. That would depend on the time of the menstruation cycle or the actual oocyte cycle. How do they actually move through your systems? Well, the microorganisms can go through the urethra, as you mentioned earlier, and they can actually go up to infect the kidneys. Some of these are normal microbiota, but they become opportunistic. And also, you could get sexual transmitted microbes that affect or infect the reproductive system. Tell me why. Bacterial urinary tract infections, UTIs, also known as UTIs. What are your signs? So again, frequent, urgent, painful urination. The urine may actually appear cloudy and with a foul odor. Okay. The pathogens happen to be enteric bacteria. They're from your gut. Okay. They become opportunistic and then they affect it. And the E. coli actually is the one that is the most common. And the virulence factors include the flagella and attached fibrae of the enteric bacteria. The pathogenesis it often results when the bacteria in fecal matter actually gets through the urethra and there's no obstruction there. And due to that reason, it is more common in females. And cystitis is when you get a bladder infection, and when you have a kidney infection, it's known as pyelonephritis. It is diagnosed with a urinal analysis. In other words, you urinate in a cup and then they look at the urine. Sometimes you don't even need treatment, although some other times you might need some antimicrobial drugs. It is prevented by limiting the contamination of fecal microbes. And of course, in the case of females, when they're little babies and girls, that's how they're trained to avoid this actual contamination. Leptospirosis is a zoonotic disease, okay, because it's actually transmitted from animals to humans. You get fever, myalgia, muscle stiffness, headaches, and it is actually rarely fatal. The pathogen is the Leptospira interrogans, and again, it normally lives in wild and domestic animals. However, these strains have adhesins, as you know, those are the protein that can attach to cell membrane surface of the host. They happen to be motile, and they can actually evade the complement activity. And this is your Leptospira interrogans. It is transmitted again with the urine of infected animals, or even in the urine that you might actually get from contaminated water. The spirochete can travel because of the adhesins via the bloodstream through the body. It occurs throughout the world, but it's very rare in the United States. The antibody test in serology gives us the actual diagnosis, and it can be treated, and it can also be prevented. streptococcal acute glomerulonephritis. Okay, so this is a strep infection, and they actually are very complex, and they can actually get to the glomeruli of your kidneys, and that is what causes the inflammation of your glomerulus and the nephrons. It can cause, well, it does produce hypertension and a low urine output. Most severe, it can be reversible kidney damage. Tell me why. Okay, toxic shock syndrome. It is caused by staphylococcus, and it gets to even to the point of vomiting, diarrhea, very low blood pressure. It could be very dangerous because individuals can go into a shock. These toxins released by the staph aureus is the one that causes this toxic shock syndrome, and it also causes excessive cytokine production of your T cells. And remember, T cells are your helper T cells, which help us against invaders, pathogens. What occurs is the actual absorption of the toxin released by staph goes into your blood, and that is what causes the syndrome. It is more, well, not more, but most of the cases happens when females are in the menstrual cycle. And that's why they say that it is best to avoid tampons or using less absorbent tampons in order not to get these toxins released into the bloodstream. And as a matter of fact, the FDA did remove the tampons in the early 80s because of the high incidence of this toxic shock syndrome. And then later on, also in the 80s, it was again put back in the market, but it required labeling. But the most indicative of the toxic shock syndrome is when females did not remove those tampons in a timely manner, or remove them and reuse them again, which is something that is a big no-no. Okay, now we're going to go into the non-venereal disease, and those are the ones that you actually don't go into your bloodstream. Okay, bacterial vaginosis. This is the type of infection that gives you a vaginal discharge in females, of course, and it is foul odor. It can be caused by various types of anaerobic bacteria, but the overgrowth of Gardnerella vaginalis is the main agent. Again, it is also associated with multiple sexual partners, and it also can be due to when a female has doing improper vaginal douching. The diagnosis is, well, signs and symptoms, and we look at clue cells. And these clue cells are the ones you see right here. They have this very concentrated area of a blue region around its actual cell walls. Okay? We also call this the vaginal epithelium coated with coccobacilli. It is treated with oral or the vaginal metronidazole drug. Vaginal candidiasis. This is again, this is due to a severe vaginal itching and burning. It is caused by Candida albicans, which happens to be yeast. Okay, and it is a normal microbiota, but it becomes opportunistic. How does it overgrow? Well, it happens because the vaginal pH becomes alkaline, okay, or the normal population or the microbial population present in the vagina becomes reduced, and the candida becomes opportunistic. It can actually become systemic in the people that have a low immune system. It is identified through the presence and the symptoms, and it can be treated with azole or fluconazole drugs. And it is important to avoid excessive use of antibacterial drugs, because then that's how the candidiasis becomes, or the candida albicans becomes opportunistic. Well, tell me why. However, if you pay attention, I pretty much answered that question for you already. STDs is the sexually transmitted disease. STIs are the sexually transmitted infections. Okay, um, it results in STD after it becomes the patient is infected. They're very common worldwide, and unfortunately, young people are the ones who are higher risk because of multiple partners. We have presence of STDs, a risk factor for the transmission of HIV. The adolescents that are female, though, are at higher risk because of the actual cervical lining in the vagina, in the cervix, rather. How is it prevented? Well, the best way to prevent it is, of course, abstinence or proper use of condoms. Tell me why. Well, this was the high STD incidence in the 80s, late 70s and 80s. Um, well, the symptoms for the men is quite obvious, painful, very painful urination. However, in the woman is very unknown because it's asymptomatic. However, it can develop later on into a pelvic inflammatory disease. Neisseria gonorrhea, which is a gram-negative diprococcus, which is the little guy we see here, is the virulent factor. And the way we look to see if it's gonorrhea, of course, you can do a blood sample and do a test for the antibody antigen. However, you also look at the fimbrial, the capsule, endotoxins under the microscope, which is what you see right here. The bacteria attaches to the epithelial cells of the mucous membranes, and then the infection actually occurs outside the reproductive tract sometimes also. Babies can get it from them, during delivery, and it actually can cause very serious conjunctivitis, of course, in the eye. Um, However, after we started using antibiotics, the cases in the U.S. has been declining, and of course, also because people have been using more safe sex regularly. And this is the big rise, like I said, in the 70s, 80s, and then after with the use of antibiotics, it has declined. Okay, it is diagnosed with genetic probes, and we can actually find out with the use of molecular biology if it's gonorrhea or not. However, with the use of micro and molecular biology, we get to understand that there's actually different strains now that have been resistant to many antimicrobials and antibiotics. So the best way to prevent it is with safe sex. Syphilis. This was the XTDs of 20s and 30s, and basically it was a huge, huge pandemic, and it has four phases: primary, secondary, latent, and tertiary. With the invention of the antibiotic penicillin, well, the discovery rather, and I remember that you should know by now is Alexander Fleming. It was mass produced in the 1940s, and after that, the syphilis started to be reduced. As a matter of fact, it's not very common for somebody to get syphilis nowadays. Of course, it still is an STD. Okay, it is a spirochete, and Treponema pallidum causes syphilis. As you can see here clearly, it is a spirochete. Um, it is transmitted via sexual contact again, uh, and it can also be transmitted via the mother to child. And however, many or most individuals do not get the tertiary syphilis. However, it's very hard to tell if you have tertiary or not. It was endemic again, especially in the 30s and 40s. Well, 40s it started to decline with people that were working in the sex industry, if you want to call it that way. You diagnose with an antibody test. You could actually tell if you have primary, secondary, and congenital syphilis with this test. And again, it is difficult to diagnose the tertiary. Penicillin is the one to treat it. And well, just like any STD is prevented with safe sex practices. And as you can see here, with the development of the mass production of penicillin, how it has declined. Chlamydia, this is an STD, however, it is asymptomatic in most women. In the case of males, they have a painful urination and even a pus discharge from their penis. It can cause different diseases such as epidermidis, orchitis, trachoma, and lymphogranuloma venereum, which is the formation of a genital lesion and a bumble in the groin. And this is the bumble in the groin that they're referring to. It is a gram-negative bacteria. It is an obligated intracellular, and that means it can only grow within the vesicles of the host cell. The cycle that is development, you can tell the bodies are infective form, and then they actually become reproductive. Okay, this is the elementary body, and it attaches to the receptor because it has the protein adhesin. Then it becomes to a initial body, and then it starts to divide into multiple initial bodies, and then right here the elemental bodies develop and they're released. Okay, how does it enter? Well, they can enter through body through scrapes or cuts. They can actually get the infect your eye or even cells in the mucous membrane, and they spread through the lymphatic system. If you get it when you're an adolescent, unfortunately, you have a higher risk of cervical cancer. Of course, that is for females. One thing that you have to know, this is the most common reportable STD in the United States. How we know if it is chlamydia for sure? Now we have the use of molecular biology, and we can actually extract the DNA from chlamydia and do a polymerase chain reaction, which is called PCR, to see the actual strain of the DNA and determine if it is a chlamydia. Okay, kangaroid. What is a kangaroid? Well, there you go. It is in women, and you get it also in men. You actually have the bacteria known as Haemophilus ducreyi. It produces the toxin that actually kills the epithelial cells, and that's where you get a kangaroid. Many of the U.S. citizens get it due to foreign travel. Okay, so that means they're not having safe sex outside of the United States. And the diagnosis it's evident, the lesion and buboes. It is treated. However, prevention is always abstinence. Tell me why. Genital herpes. Okay, genital herpes is not only caused by herpes 2, which is most people think. It can also be caused by herpes 1. Okay, some people might not even know they have it because the actual virus may be latent in the nerve cells. It kills the epithelial cells once it is actually ongoing. Blisters forms, and even babies can become infected during rebirth. And this is the different type of fevers. Blisters usually 1, ocular herpes, and genital herpes usually 2. However, like I said, it could be also herpes 1 that can cause genital herpes. Okay, you do not have a cure for it. You do have acyclovir, which is a drug that actually helps with the symptoms. For some reason, it says that circumcised males are at lower risk, but it doesn't mean they cannot get it. Condoms happen to be little protection. However, if the female is infected, they should deliver by C-section. Okay, so what causes genital warts? Your HPV, your human papillomavirus. Okay, again, these are viral proteins that can trigger cancer later on in life, in females, that is. This is genital warts in a male. As you can see here, it invades the skin and mucous membrane during sex. It's most common STD in the US, however, chlamydia also. Okay, there is vaccines now available, HPV, and there's multiple vaccines that are actually given to females. However, adolescent females are not the only ones to be offered the HPV vaccine. It's also actually offered to the adolescent males. Tell me why. Okay, now we're going to move on to protozoans. From viral, now we are in a different type of STDs, the protozoans. Trich infection, you must have heard of the trichomoniasis, also known as trich infections, okay? And when the females have it has a vaginal discharge and irritation, and in the case of males, they're actually asymptomatic, typically. Trichomonas vaginalis, and I kind of a joke, I call it a cuprozoan with a flagella because you see right here, he has all these multiple flagellas, and but it's not a bacteria. Again, it's a protozoan. Okay, it's via sexual intercourse, most of it, primarily how people get it. However, it is the most curable STD in women. Okay, uh, although it increases the risk of infection by HIV, and many virulence factors contribute to this. It is diagnosed with a clinical sample. Okay, and basically, it is actually treated with a drug known as oral metronidazole. Again, sexual intercourse with infected people, if prevented, is the best practice. Tell me why. And this concludes part 3 of 3 of lecture 8.